Hello and welcome into the Birds of the Round Table. We're running out of things to talk about, but we're going to do it anyways. We've been through free agency. Now we're turning our attention to the draft. Today, we're going to look at the Eagles roster and talk about what some of the bigger positions of need are as we draw closer to the draft, and maybe talk about a few of the bargain bin free agents that are still out there on the market. So we're going to get into that. I'm your host, Shane Haff. Give me a follow on Twitter at Shane Haff NFL. Also joined by the rest of the crew. Up first, we have Dibes. Give him a follow at Mr. Crockpot. Dibes, how are you doing tonight?
What's going on, man? Let's do this.
All right. Also joined by Ryan Reese. Give him a follow on Twitter at Philly Sports PSA. Ryan, how are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. Anytime we're talking draft, so I'm in.
All right. Just so you know, it tests my memory of your Twitter handles every time Dibes pops a comment up while I'm trying to go through it. But so far, I'm doing good. Also joined by David. Give him a follow on Twitter at PHL Eagle News. David, how are you doing?
Doing great. Like Ryan said, I echo that sentiment. We're less than a month away from the draft, so it's a good time of year. Some people think it's the boring time of year. I love this time of year.
All right. Well, let's dive into it, guys. First things first. We're going to take stock of the Eagles roster with the free agent signings we have so far, and we're going to assign a grade to each position group. And that is, as we head into the draft, we either need a starter at this position, we need a future starter at the position, so maybe a guy that you don't need to start this year, but in the next couple of years, a succession plan. We need a rotational player there. We need a developmental player, or it's just not a need whatsoever. So those are our 5 categories: starter, future starter needed, rotational player needed, developmental player needed, or not a need whatsoever. And so let's jump into the offense first, and we'll talk about quarterback. And so, Dibes, I'll throw it to you first. Eagles quarterback position, how would you rank that as a need headed into the draft?
You look at Jalen Hurts coming off an MVP in the Super Bowl, under contract through 2028. Tanner McKee entering the final year of his rookie contract. As everyone here knows, I'm very high on Tanner McKee. Finally, QB2 of the Philadelphia Eagles. And then you got DTR, QB3 here coming in. I think they're fine. I do think they're fine. I'm going to say not a need.
All right. Not a need. DTR hype train leaving the station here. Ryan, do you agree with that? I know you're a big Tanner McKee fan.
Yeah. I'm surprised my eyes are still in my socket after I was eye rolling for Dibes' love of Tanner McKee there. But yeah, listen, I do have to agree with Dibes, not on the Tanner McKee love, but on the fact that it's really not a need at this point. You have Hurts, who's obviously the man. You have 2 young quarterbacks. One that, again, you hope will continue to be your backup. One that, had a rough go in Cleveland. And yeah, listen, you bring them into the new, system and hope that it, works out. So I think right now, not a need. Maybe after, Tanner McKee leaves for more money and breaks Dibes' heart, and DTR maybe doesn't pan out, then yeah, we probably might need somebody. But right now, we're good.
All right. David, do you agree with that? Is quarterback not a need? We know this is a QB factory.
Yeah, I'll take not a need for 100 also. There is no need. So yeah, I agree with everything. Tanner McKee has proven he can win a game when he has to. DTR is probably the best player you are going to find at that price range and at that level that can kind of do some of the things that Jalen can do if they're trying to develop somebody long term. And whichever one gets flipped next year for another 5th round or 6th round pick, then they'll worry about it in that draft. But I don't imagine they're selecting a quarterback in this one unless they just really don't like something they've seen about DTR.
All right, so quarterback officially not a need. Let's move on to running back, where the Eagles have the trio of Saquon Barkley, A.J. Dillon, and Will Shipley. Ryan, I'll throw it to you first here. How do you see this slotting in?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for the running back group when you already have, a young backup in Shipley. You have a veteran in Dillon, and then you have an MVP caliber player. There's not a lot of room for a running back on this roster, but I'm not going to say it's not a need. I'm going to say that I wouldn't be surprised if maybe later on in the draft they went ahead for a developmental player, just for the fact that we don't really know what we're getting with A.J. Dillon. Will Shipley certainly has looked good in small, spurts, but ultimately, do we think he ever could take over the number one spot? Should he ever have to? I don't know how they feel about that. So I would say developmental player needed.
All right. Does anybody else have differing opinions on running back?
Yeah, I think it's a rotational player needed. A.J. Dillon gives me those Rashad Penny vibes, man. I wouldn't expect much out of him. And as far as Will Shipley, I mean, I think all of our concerns going into the draft, because a lot of us had other running backs ranked higher than him on draft night. Because I remember when he was selected and all of us kind of were like, we all had somebody else. I think they do need somebody who's reliable in pass pro. Can Shipley do that? Maybe. I don't know. But this team is on a 3-year window right now to win Super Bowls. And I'd want somebody guaranteed to do it. And I think they're looking into it too, which is why they had Jaden Blue come in for a 30 visit. I know that they've scouted Bashal Tutin from Virginia Tech. So I do think it's a bigger need than maybe some do. And no, we haven't. I don't think we've seen him block enough. I agree. I think they need somebody more reliable in pass pro.
I don't know. I'm excited about A.J. Dillon. I think we're going to be talking about him in just a little bit, but I think he's a better pass protector than Will Shipley. Yeah, he has to stay healthy, but I do think there is something there. And I agree, David, that this is a very, very good running back class, and having a guy, signed longer than A.J. Dillon's 1-year contract would be good. Shane, we need to split this. I'm going to go developmental guy. I'm going to side with Ryan. What about you?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm gonna assume A.J. Dillon's healthy because that's really all I can. I mean, that's all we can do. We don't know that. If A.J. Dillon's not healthy, then they need a rotational player. If A.J. Dillon is healthy, then I guess I would go developmental because I'm pretty much pro drafting a day 3 running back every season with the caveat they've got to make your roster. If you're going to spend a draft pick on them, you want to roster them. And I don't think the Eagles will carry 4 running backs. And so then it comes down to, like, if you draft somebody, one of Dillon, Shipley, and your draft pick are not going to make the roster. And assuming Dillon's healthy, I would think it would be between Shipley and a draft pick. And I don't like drafting a guy just to cut him. That annoyed me with I'm blanking now, the lineman that we did that to this season. Who was the center that we drafted? Dylan McMahon, that we drafted, and then he got sniped by the Rams, and that annoyed me. So I will go developmental player needed, but I do think it's a tricky position to handle because you don't know what A.J. Dillon's health is. But if he is healthy, I don't know. You run into a logjam of roster spots there, but I do want somebody that can carry a bit of a load and not run Saquon's touches up there again. So let's go over to wide receiver, where the Eagles have one of the best duos in the NFL in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. They traded for Jahan Dotson last year. And then behind that, they have Johnny Wilson and Anais Smith, Elijah Cooks. They did not bring back Britton Covey. David, what are your feelings on the wide receiver position?
I don't think that's a need. I mean, AJ is signed through 29, Devontae signed through 28, Dotson they have for 2 more seasons. If anything, maybe a developmental guy, but like you said, I don't know where he would fit on the roster. He would have to offer more. You have Aeneas Smith, who might be a punt returner, Johnny Wilson, who they invested in. So I don't know where they would fit him on the roster, because I do believe that they might keep 4 running backs. So I think they might be one lighter at wide receiver.
All right. Yeah. I think I would lean more towards developmental player needed here, because the Eagles have a really good wide receiver duo. It gets pretty dicey pretty quick after that. And I mean, that's a thing for a lot of teams for sure. But you look at Anais Smith, I'm just not sure he's an NFL player, to be honest. Like they couldn't get him on the field last year. He looked really bad in training camp. And I was pretty excited about Johnny Wilson, but Johnny Wilson was fairly disappointing to me throughout the year. He's good as a blocker, but just didn't really offer much separation wise. Bad drops several times throughout the season. So I would love to see an upgrade on either one of those guys for a wide receiver 4. So I'm in the developmental player needed camp. Dives, Ryan, what do you guys think?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the developmental players is definitely needed. You have, the top 2 guys. You have a vet in Dotson, and then question marks. And I'm not saying that Wilson isn't going to make the roster or Smith, but they have certainly kept 6 wide receivers before. And yeah, I would love somebody that's actually going to get onto the field. Unlike Anais Smith, who I don't see him really making an impact or a dent getting onto the field. So I wouldn't mind maybe a day 2, early day 3 guy.
To be fair, is any wide receiver 4 or 5 getting on the field unless
They're not. They're not getting targets.
No, but I'd feel better about it if ours actually lined up.
Yeah, this one's hard because I agree with David on one hand. Like they're not getting targets, as we saw with Jahan Dotson last year. But on the other end, we have to prepare for this AJ Brown trade that's going down shortly with New England Patriots. So, but anyway, I think
don't do that and confuse somebody who just hears that part.
Dives, there are listeners to the podcast that aren't on Twitter. Then you said that so deadpan, people are going to think you're being serious.
I know, and we're going to get roped into it.
Yeah. Being real, Anais Smith, Johnny Wilson didn't show me much of anything last year. Johnny Wilson was a much more negative player on the field. Anais Smith disappointed me big time. Let's go developmental player.
All right. So now we go to tight end, where the Eagles currently still have Dallas Goedert. We'll see how that plays out over the next couple of months. They also have Grant Calcaterra, EJ Jenkins. They brought in Harrison Bryant and Kylan Granson in free agency. I'm going to say they need a future starter here. They need a starter now if they move on from Goddard, but since that hasn't happened yet, I would put them squarely in the future starter needed camp. They can't use Grant Calcaterra to run the football the way that they want to run the football, and they want to be a running team. And so they need to prepare for the future, and the future might be now if they make a move on from Dallas Goedert, which I think would be a mistake. But so I am future starter needed for this one. What do you guys think? Does anybody disagree with that?
No, I think this is a big need. And I do think they're going to move on from Dallas Goedert, unfortunately. Probably day 2, as we've talked about on this show, Gunnar Helm, Mason Taylor, not Harold Fannin. Sorry, Ryan. I had to throw that in
your way now.
But what Howie does with addressing that position in this draft is going to be fascinating. Maybe it's not even a player in the draft. Maybe he trades for a guy we haven't even talked about or are thinking about. So definitely starter needed.
All right. Starter or future starter?
Sorry, future starter.
All right. David, any thoughts on tight end?
Same. I think they're using a premium pick, top 3 round pick, top 100 pick on a tight end. So yeah, future starter.
All right. So that's our first starter position we need, although we did say the caveat of a future starter as long as Goddard's still on the contract. Let's go to interior offensive linemen. This one could be interesting. So the Eagles have Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens returning as starters. Mekhi Becton walks in free agency. I think presumably Tyler Steen would get the nod right now. You also acquired Kenyon Green in the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson trade. They have Brett Toth, Trevor Keegan. So that's kind of what you're looking at on the interior. David, how would you slot this one in?
It's tricky there because it's like rotational player needed, but I don't know how to you would say that for a starting position, but it is a rotational player needed. I think they're going to use a pretty high pick. I think that's why you've seen 12 to 15 offensive linemen brought into the building so far. They're using their prospect lists of their top 30 visits or 30 visits, however you word it, heavily for the offensive line. So I think it's going to be addressed pretty early. I think they'd like somebody who can probably do both and maybe shift over eventually, like a Charles Grant or somebody like that could play interior and possibly kick out, 2 years down the road if Lane decides to leave then. But yeah, I guess rotational player needed because I don't know how else to word it. I don't think future starter right now, but maybe future starter as well. He very well could beat out Tyler Steen.
Yeah, it's interesting because I could see him drafting a guard at 32 and playing him if they're not comfortable with Steen. I wouldn't say it's the biggest need, but it could be a need. I don't know. I'm not sure how to word this one either. Ryan, I'll throw it over to you. And I skipped you for tight end too. So give me your tight end thoughts and your interior offensive line thoughts all wrapped up in a bow here.
I'm never going to forgive you for that.
I just didn't want to hear you talk about Harold Fannin.
No, save that for armchair. No, I agree that we definitely need a future starter, but I also feel like developmental player is also needed. I think our tight end room is a hot mess, and I'm sorry, I'm not happy with Grant Calcaterra leading the charge. If we're trading, Dallas Goedert, we need a future starter and a developmental piece. As far as interior offensive line, this is really tough because I want to say starter needed because while yes, you definitely have somebody that maybe the Eagles are high on, and maybe they want Steen to take that role. But then why are we, kind of doing a lot of the top 30 visits? It's because they're not completely sold on it. So in my opinion, I think a starter is needed because you need to figure out one way or the other who the hell's getting that right guard spot. And I think, you're going to, whether you call it a starter needed or future starter needed, I don't know, but you need somebody in there right now. So.
All right. We need the option for competition for starter with the potential to be a rotational player depth piece.
Right.
Needed.
Yeah, Dives, come on.
Yeah, come on, Dives. Why don't you have that in there?
No matter who starts at right guard this year, it'll be the 7th opening day season in a row that it'll be somebody different, and that's really crazy and
troubling
considering how good their line has been. That's kind of surprising that they've had 7 different starters on opening day the past 7 years.
Wow,
I miss Brandon Brooks.
Yeah, definitely.
I was going to say, can you name all 7?
Becton, Jurgens, and then I have no idea. That's 2. Obviously, Brooks was 1.
Fred Johnson started, didn't he?
The opening day.
Sayamalu,
Sayamalu, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sayamalu was Sayamalu left guard though?
Oh wait.
Oh, on the
I don't
Did
know.
he ever start at a right guard?
I just know there's 7 of them because I just researched it. There's 6. This year will be the 7th on opening day, but I can't remember who they all were.
Oh man, that's rough. Halapoti Vaitai.
There's a bunch of unforgettable ones. Again, they've replaced them 6 years in a row. This would be the 7th, so it's been a revolving door at that position.
Yeah. Danny Watkins?
No, that's no.
Yeah.
I just wanted to trigger some people.
He was a firefighter the past 7 years. He wasn't on an NFL roster.
Sure was.
All right. So let's keep rolling to offensive tackle, where the Eagles return their superstar tackle duo of Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. And Lane Johnson obviously had his deal reworked this offseason as well. Presumably is going to play at least 2 more seasons, and we'll see beyond that. Outside of those two guys, though, there's not much there. Darian Kennard is still on the roster, and that's really about it in terms of noteworthy players. So, Dibes, how would you fit in offensive tackle here?
I hate that I go first on this one. A big part of this is the Jeff Stoutland variable in play here. And I like the idea of getting like a Gray Zabel at 32, way more than offensive tackle. Gray Zabel can play anywhere. And I'm not a big fan of a lot of the tackles available, especially with a premium asset. So I'm going to say rotation player because I do think in Jeff Stoutland, I trust that he'll be able to coach someone up on like day 3 for down the line. I mean, we've kept saying year after year that, you know, we need to find Lane Johnson's replacement. Well, Lane Johnson's been just fine for the most part. So I'm going to go rotation player for now.
All right. Rotation player, Ryan, where are you at on offensive tackle?
Yeah, this is tough. I feel like with the fact that Lane's original contract was 2 years, and he has always said he would play out the remainder of his contract. Yeah, I'm good with like a, you know, rotational. If you want to call that a developmental, I'm good either way. I don't necessarily want to draft the heir apparent and have him sit for 2 years. So I'm not ready to spend high capital on it. But if you know, as Dive said, if you grab a guy that can be your right guard for a year or two and then kick out, then so be it. But I think at this point, you just need some depth. So yeah, I'll say rotational.
All right, David, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd say developmental player needed. If you look at it by round, I'm guessing they might use a 5th round pick or something on an offensive tackle. There's a couple I like late like that, like Holland Pierce and a couple other guys who kind of fit the profile. I think the guy who they just signed, Kendall Lamb, is the new Fred Johnson. So I think he kind of falls right into that role. And there's also, I don't know how to pronounce his name, the guy who's from Australia, Mailata's.
Yeah.
However you, Lakin, is that how you say his first name? Lakin.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. You know, he did wonders with Mailata, so I don't know. I'm curious to see that what the progress on that is as well. They've been using him, you know, as a player who they don't have to count on their roster for the exemption, but I think that they're developing him. You still have Darian Kennard. I wouldn't imagine they'd use a high resource, but 5th round, so I don't know. I'd just go developmental player.
All right. I'm with you on that. I'm good with developmental player as well. The time to think about Lane Johnson's successor is not when he's going to play at least 2 more seasons and you're in a Super Bowl window. So that does it for the offensive side of the ball. We went QB, not a need, running back and wide receiver, and offensive tackle, developmental player needed, interior offensive line, rotational player needed, and tight end, future starter needed. So let's go to the defense, where I think some of the conversations are a bit more. Yes, Ryan, you're waving.
I didn't want to. I wanted to get to you before you hit to the defense. I do have the list of right guards since Brandon Brooks was starting in 2019. 2020 was Nate Herbig. 2021 was Jack Driscoll. 22 was Isaac Seumalo. Cam Jurgens for 23. And then, you know, the rest. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. So there you have it. Well, let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball now. And let's start in the trenches at edge rusher. And Ryan, I'll throw it to you first. Where does edge rusher rank for the Eagles?
I mean, it has to be at this point. Oh man, I don't know. I just convinced myself in my head and it switched. Well, that's the thing. It's would be nice right now to get a starter, right? You know, you have Nolan Smith, who obviously has proved himself, had a great season and even better playoff run. You have Jalix Hunt, who's still very young and developmental, going to get into that rotation. But I feel like since we, lost so much on that line, I would love to get a starter. On that opposite side of Nolan Smith. That way, Jalix Hunt isn't pushed into a bigger role than he needs to be, and you can kind of again slow play him, get him some snaps, and utilize him to his best ability.
All right, David, what are your thoughts about the edge rusher position?
Well, we got Nolan Smith, Bryce Huff is still on the roster, Jalix Hunt. You signed Aziz, you signed Uche. I mean, it's kind of loaded there. I would probably go developmental player needed, and if somebody really, really good falls, maybe go rotational player needed. They really loaded up at that position. I do think it's something they're going to address, but I don't know how high unless somebody fell. It's hard to somewhere in between rotational player and developmental player, probably like a 4th round maybe kind of range, but you never know because they value that position very highly. So somebody fell maybe, but I don't know. So somewhere between rotation and development.
Who's your starter right now?
The starters, Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt.
I would start Aziz over Jalix, but yeah.
But they'll probably split it.
Yeah. Edge rusher is weird because like I would like the Eagles to spend their 1st round draft pick on an edge rusher.
Yeah.
But I almost don't want them to spend their 2nd or 3rd round pick on an edge rusher because I need a guy that can take volume snaps. And if that's not what we're doing, it's like I've got a bunch of 3rd round pick type guys on the roster already that are my developmental pieces that I can play in a rotation. So for me, it's almost like good edge rusher or bust. And that's kind of where I sit with it. So I don't know how to frame that around these grades, but if I had to pigeonhole it somewhere, I guess I would say like developmental. Like I wouldn't say it's not a need entirely because Aziz and Uche are both on 1-year deals. And then you're kind of back to square one, the same place next year. And so I would like you to bring somebody in, but I almost want it to be like a guy that's just going to start or a guy that can end up being on your practice squad. So that's kind of where I'm at. Dibes, what about you?
Yeah, I would say I swing more towards the starter needed. I'm probably future starter needed. You nailed it. I think Ojulari starts, but he's on a 1-year deal. Uche, I like his fit, like his potential, but he's a question mark. Bryce Huff, I hope they trade him. Jalix Hunt, is he ready for that many snaps? I'm not sure. For me, I would like them to address get a bigger edge that can play 3 downs going forward. I like the guys they're adding. Don't get me wrong, but I think right now, looking at the guys in this draft, there's a lot of guys that are raw and are going to be rotation players year 1 and could be potentially that starter down the line. So right now, I'm going to go future starter needed.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah, I guess that sort of makes sense to me as well because, like I said, you got the guys on the 1-year deals. And so edge rusher is also a little weird in that you need more than 2 guys that can really start given how the rotation works. So even if Jalix Hunt hits and he becomes a reliable piece, you still basically need a 3rd starting edge rusher. So you swayed me, Dives. I'm good with future starter needed.
Oh, snap.
Me too.
David's not, but we apparently, but we outnumber him. No.
we just don't have that many draft picks. I just don't know. I mean, something's got to get pushed down, but
Yeah. All right. So let's go to the other trenches position. Let's go defensive tackle. And at defensive tackle, the Eagles, where did my depth chart go? I might have accidentally closed the depth chart. Goodness. I will pull it back up, but it's Jalen Carter. They lose Milton Williams in free agency. They're expecting, I think, Moro Ojomo to take a step here. Jordan Davis is still on the roster. You got Thomas Booker, Gabe Hall, and so some of your names at defensive tackle there. Dives, I'll throw it to you first. Where are you at on DT?
I'm looking at the depth chart. Obviously, the question mark begins and ends with Jordan Davis and how Howie views him going forward. I like Thomas Booker. I think he's got upside. Not sure about Gabe Hall. I was a big fan of his during the draft process. But the Jordan Davis thing is definitely the question mark. Give me rotation player needed, because I think Jalen Carter's impact here makes them immediate future starters.
All right. So rotation player needed. Ryan, where are you at?
I'm going future starter needed. Again, just like Edge, I feel like you definitely need a good rotation. At least the way that the Eagles have been running it, it has been working. And you lose somebody like Milton Williams, and again, this is no offense to Moro Ojomo, but you're still needing to replace a good amount of snaps. And I kind of think that Jordan Davis, while very effective situationally, I would love to have somebody there full time next to Carter and just have the two of them just go nuts. If you want to call that a developmental player, I feel like when I hear developmental player, that means you draft somebody in the 5th round and you work on him, and 3 years later he's playing, halfway decent minutes. That's what I think of developmental player. So I'm going to say future starter needed. I'd love to spend early capital on a interior defensive lineman.
We got Ryan in full March Madness swing, talking about guys playing minutes instead of snaps here.
Sorry. You know what I meant.
All right, David, what about you?
I think it's one of, if not the biggest need on the team. I'm going starter needed. I think we do know what Jordan Davis is. I think we've already seen how Fangio wants to use him and how many snaps they're comfortable with him playing. I don't know that he's ever going to be the pass rusher that a lot of people hoped he'd be. Moro Ojomo, I loved him. I had him ranked as like a 3rd round pick in that draft. I think I had him number 100 on my player list. It still doesn't mean I think he's Milton Williams. I know a lot of people joked and said Jalen Carter made Milton Williams a lot of money. Yeah, he likely did, but that position's also paying a ton of money. And Jalen Carter benefits by having somebody like Milton Williams beside him too. Interior pressure is one of the most important parts of their defense, and I think that it's a big need, so I'm going starter.
I'm with David here. This is it. I would like to see the Eagles end up. I know I mentioned edge rusher in the 1st round. Defensive tackle is where, like in an ideal world, I would love to see the Eagles draft a pass rushing defensive tackle, a Derek Harmon type guy in the 1st round, because I just think like the run defense is so good, and you're going to have Jalen Carter back, and you're going to have Nolan Smith, and you're going to have Zach Bond behind him, and that bolsters your run defense a lot. If you can get a guy that's just a good pass rusher, and maybe he needs to come along as a run defender, but if you can get a good pass rusher next to Jalen Carter, I think that could be one of the most impactful 1st round picks the Eagles could make this year. So starter needed for me for defensive tackle as well. This is where I would like to see the Eagles focus. So, okay, let's go to linebacker, where the Eagles bring back Zach Bond. Nakobe Dean's going to be recovering from injury. We don't know what that's going to look like. They brought back Ben Van Sumeren, but announced him as a fullback. So I'm assuming he's not a linebacker anymore. And so that basically leaves you right now with Zach Bond and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. as your only two healthy linebackers. So, I mean, the discussion starts here with rotational player needed because the Eagles just have no depth there whatsoever. And depending on your views of Trotter Jr., I guess it could go higher than that. David, what do you think about linebacker?
Yeah, I think it's a rotational player needed. I do think they're relying on Nakobe Dean to be healthier than most people expect him to be, which would be quite a surprise to even me because I know how devastating an injury that is and how infrequently a lot of players return to a high level. But I'd be stunned if they used a higher pick than the level of rotational player needed. They found an Oren Burks on the street last year. I think they'll look for something like that again this year. So for me, it would just be rotational player needed.
All right, Ryan.
You know who's a really good Oren Burks type?
Oren Burks.
Oh yeah, Oren Burks, where they could have had him. Anyway, I'm not salty at all. Yeah, listen, I am fearing the worst here with Nakobe Dean. Maybe that's the Philadelphia sports fan in me, but I am thinking that this is a lot bigger need than most. I think you're gonna need a starter. Right now, you're right. Are you comfortable starting Jeremiah Trotter? As much as I love Trot, and I screamed for them to the mountains to draft Trotter. Again, I understood that he was going to take a while before he would, have his impact felt on this team. Right now, I'm not comfortable with him starting, and I don't see any potential Oren Burks that they can just pluck out of thin air. I would love them to draft somebody young early, but again, call that whatever you want. If you want to call that a future starter needed or a starter needed, I'm not comfortable with the starters right now. So I would love a starter.
All right, Ryan wants a linebacker.
Shocking.
That's something I never saw coming. By the way, seems like a great time to plug Armchair Scouts going live in about 10 minutes, covering linebacker rankings. So hang out here, but we got to finish this out first. Dives, where are you at on linebacker?
Yeah, I'm going to say rotation player need. I think Vic Fangio deserves the benefit of the doubt here. He'll find someone that can fit in there that could rotate with Trot Jr. Give me rotation.
All right, I'm with you guys. Rotation is, I think, where I'm at. I think hopefully between Nakobe Dean and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., you have something. I also just don't think the Eagles are going to take a linebacker that high. And I almost feel better about Jeremiah Trotter Jr. playing in year 2 because he would be beside Zach Bond, who is so good in the run game, and it could help cover up some of those deficiencies with Trotter's size. So I do think he's a cerebral player that could pick up the coverage things quickly. So it does make me not as terrified as if Zach Bond would have left, which was my greatest fear.
Can we get to a comment?
Yeah.
We have a comment here asking who will take the biggest step back on offense or defense next year. Any takers?
The defense.
Defense. They have nowhere to go.
Oh, who specifically? I think, right?
Oh, I read that question to ask which unit, the offense or the defense.
Oh, maybe.
It's got to be.
I read it wrong.
Like,
it has to be the defense.
And that's okay. It's okay.
I personally think it's going to be, if an individual, I think it's going to be Zach Bond.
If it's an individual, I think it's going to be whoever the cornerback opposite Quinyon Mitchell is.
I don't know if Keely Ringo can take a step back.
I think losing Slay is a lot worse than most people think.
Yeah.
We also have all together hundreds of hours of us losing sleep, seeing the linebacker position be the weak spot of the defense, where like a single guy can get picked apart over and over and over again. I think Vic Fangio is too smart to let that happen, but
I love all of your plans was Oh, we'll just get a guy.
Vaughn and a guy is pretty
That's
good.
a lot of faith, man. I gotta tell you. You
Vaughn
get
and a
one
guy
good
is
year,
better
you guys
than-
got a lot of faith.
But it is better than anything they had for 20 years. Vaughn and me is better than
Well,
anything they
you're
had
not
for 20
wrong.
years.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Although Nigel Bradham had his moments.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go to cornerback, where the Eagles did lose Darius Slay, like David mentioned, but they do bring back Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. They signed Adoree Jackson in free agency. They have Keely Ringo, who they traded up for a couple of drafts ago. Eli Ricks is still in the building. Perry Nickerson, AJ Woods. This is the position. I'm just going to say it's not a need. I feel like your 2 draft picks from last year were awesome. You checked the box I wanted you to do, and you brought in Adoree Jackson because he was the Giants' best quarterback last year. He's a competent starter. It gives you a floor at the outside on opposite Quinyon Mitchell if Keely Ringo bottoms out or doesn't win the job, and you're 4 deep at cornerback. And so I kind of feel like cornerback's just not a need. I don't know what that hand motion is, Ryan.
I was just shaking hands with Davey.
Yeah.
We have
I gotcha.
agreed that I am the burner account, apparently.
All right. So CB, not a need for me. Dives, what say you?
I disagree. I think if there's a position outside of like the trenches, like D tackle, edge, and someone falls like a Maxwell Hairston, Howie's absolutely going to pull the trigger there in the first round. I think he just
the Howie that didn't draft a first round defensive back for 25 years is going to do it back-to-back seasons.
I think day 1, day 2 cornerback is definitely in play. I'm going to go, and this is really about Keely Ringo. I'm not the highest on Keely. I'm excited to see his growth this offseason. Don't get me wrong. Adoree Jackson doesn't really move the needle for me. Good coverage player, but 1-year deal. Give me a future starter needed.
All right, Ryan, where are you at?
Yeah, listen, I'm with Dives on this one. While losing Slay certainly hurts, and as a Keely Ringo fan, as somebody who's wanted him to get more snaps, if you will. I still think a future starter is needed, and I think the Eagles, might be more in tune with that aspect or that thinking. While yes, could you kind of consider Ringo a slight step down from Isaiah Rodgers? Sure. Is Adoree Jackson certainly better than Avonte Maddox? Yeah. But still, having somebody competent on the other side of Q will not only allow Q to do his thing, will allow Coop to do his thing. I think that is potentially what is the best for this young core, is to getting some sort of starter, whether it be drafting another guy or going out and getting somebody via trade or maybe signing somebody. I don't know who might be still left, but still, I would like them to go do that.
All right, David, thoughts on cornerback?
I have it as like a rotation player needed. I think Adoree Jackson is kind of like the Isaiah Rodgers. I do not think Keely Ringo is going to fill in for Slay, but that might be what their plan is. I do think they'll probably draft another corner this draft, but I do agree with Shane in the fact that it probably is not coming with their 32nd overall pick in the draft. But if they move down, gain another pick, they got 3 2026 third-round picks. They could deal the one that's already on the books. So I do think they'll take one. I had it at like the 4th position of need, so I guess that's around a rotation player need.
All right.
What do we do for this?
You do mine because they're at the top, Shane's at the bottom. So you go middle, rotational player.
Sounds like you split the middle.
All right.
So we'll say a rotational player needed. And that brings us to safety, which was the most shocking move of the offseason so far. With Chauncey Gardner-Johnson being shipped out, that leaves Reed Blankenship and presumably Sidney Brown as your starters, with Tristan McCollum, Lewis Seen, and Andre Sam also on the roster. Guys, we need a starting safety. Like that's the slam dunk starter needed one for me. Like I very uncomfortable with how the safety room looks right now. What are your thoughts, David?
I think they like a veteran presence in there more than a rookie one, if I'm being completely honest. I think they're going to look at two of the guys, if we're going to talk about that later. There's a couple guys still available. I think they're probably going to look towards that. I do agree they need a starter, though. They definitely need a starter, whether it's through the draft or whether it's, through the free agency. I do think Justin Simmons is one, definitely. I think if they do, it might be after the draft. He waited around till that part of the year last season, so I could see him doing that again as well.
Yeah. I'm going to assume Dibes agrees because he already put it on the chart here. But
I'm not drinking the Sidney Brown Kool-Aid. I just can't. Just from what I've seen, great special teamer. Don't get me wrong, but him getting a lot of snaps next year, that's bold. Give me absolutely starter needed.
But before we move on, the starter that they lost and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, what did y'all rank his year? Like, how good of a season did you think he really had?
Average.
I called for him to be benched around midseason.
Right. So,
and he got better.
What are we losing?
He was definitely better down the stretch, but he was outright bad for the first 6 to 8 weeks.
I'll say this. I think we lost more attitude, locker room than anything. So if that tells you what you need to hear, then that tells you what you need to hear, right?
I would agree with that. They lost the bravado and the attitude and the swagger that he brought. But as far as play on the field, I don't know what the drop off will be, because I don't think any of us really saw him have a Pro Bowl type of season.
Yeah. Ryan, I'll let you bring it home here on safety. Where are you at safety?
I don't know. I don't think it's really a need. No. Yeah, obviously we got to get a starter. I think, again, my sense of time, my timeline ever since COVID has been, it's just awful. But I do remember us at one point wanting Reed Blankenship to be the third safety, and now he's our best safety. So I don't know what that tells you, but we got to bring in somebody. I'm not ready for, Sidney Brown to just run full speed at somebody and, I don't want to picture it.
I am here for that. I definitely want to see that happen.
I mean, I like that aspect of it, but there's a lot of wrong that gets with that. So
I have a few tweets floating around where I said Sidney Brown's my favorite Eagle of all time. And then in parentheses, I would always say, not really, but maybe. You can go search it out. There's a few splash plays of his that I really liked, especially his rookie season. But so that wraps up our defense here. Predictably, we're viewing bigger needs on the defensive side of the ball, which is to be expected when your offense is returning 10 of 11 starters. But we had a few other questions we were going to run through about some free agent targets and some things like that. We're going to save those for next week because, as always, Dibes said this would be a 30-minute show, and we're here 50 minutes in.
The jigs continues.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here so we can get over to Armchair Scouts. We're going to break down the linebackers here in just a few minutes, so you guys can stay tuned for that. But before we get out of here, I'll throw it around the horn for final thoughts and plugs. David, I'll throw it to you first, man.
I will answer his question. I do think they like Tristan McCullum. I do think they want to see what Lewis Seen has available as well. He'd be the sixth Georgia dog starter out there with disease. Seventh. I mean, that's crazy. So I don't know. I think that they might be more comfortable with their room and just adding a veteran safety, but we will see. Unless somebody falls, you never know. I think Andrew Makuba would probably be the best fit in the area in which they'd be willing to, invest a pick. But You can find everything I do at PHL Eagle News. I had a piece today about the 7 right guards that Ryan so happily rattled off for us earlier. But yeah, you can follow everything I do there. Everything I post always goes there. And I appreciate all of your interactions and comments and views. Thank you all. Follow all these nut jobs as well. Which way is that? That way? All right.
Yeah, you pointed the wrong way, but we appreciate it anyway. All right, Ryan, the floor is yours, man. Final thoughts, plugs. What do you got?
Just first of all, I'd like to shout out Little G, as always. Happy birthday, Little G, on Wednesday.
Happy birthday.
We'll be thinking about you. This is a great exercise to kind of before the draft, kind of see where we think our team is. There's still obviously plenty of time for Howie to kind of do some Howie things, but let's be real. That's most likely what we're going into the draft with, and it'll be interesting to see. I cannot wait for what we have in store for the draft. We got again, more armchair scouts. We got the draft guidebook, live streaming the draft, all that fun stuff heading your way. So draft season, baby. And of course, make sure you're following all of these guys.
All right. Dives, Europe, man. Final thoughts.
Malachi Starks. 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 Malachi Starks.
All right. Well, that is going to do it here for this episode of, I almost said of the Armchair Scouts, of Birds of the Round Table. Have I called this show Armchair Scouts multiple times tonight? Because now that I almost did, I kind of feel like I have.
I feel like you just have referenced it a few times.
Okay, maybe so. Anyways, thank you guys for joining us. Always fun to hang out and talk about the Birds with you guys on Tuesday nights. We'll be back here next Tuesday night. We'll get to some of the questions, some free agent things. But my final thought, though, I just want to shout out the New York Giants for a week ago on a show with Johnny. We commended the Giants for not going after Russell Wilson. Since then they've signed Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson, and we'll complete the trifecta. I'm speaking it into existence on draft night when they trade up to number 2 and take Shadur Sanders.
Oh, I love it.
Just have the worst quarterback room ever.
I love it.
So shout out to the New York Giants. Never change. Continue to just be a perennial cellar dweller. So there you go. That's going to do it, guys. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Birds of the Round Table. If you like what you hear, be sure you're subscribed to the Eagles Pinpool Network, wherever you get your podcasts. 5-star ratings and reviews really help us get the show out there. Stay tuned, live viewers. We're going to go live in just a moment with the Armchair Scouts on the podcast feed. It'll be coming out tomorrow. So that's going to do it, guys. We will catch you next time.